Muhammad when he supposedly was visited by Gideon. I mean, not Gideon, Gabriel. And, you know, it must have been the same spirit. So either that means it's God, and therefore both Mormonism and Islam is true, or it's Satan, and both of them are false. That's my 2 cents worth.
Should I read a brief passage about Muhammad?
Read it quick, break it up, so we'll go back to Glenn.
I'm going to read a passage from the Sirat Rasulullah, just because I believe it's the best historical source about Muhammad. But you find the same thing in Sahih al-Bukhari, if you'd like to read it there. I believe it's the third hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. This is when the angel appeared to Muhammad. When it was the night on which God honored him with his mission and showed mercy on his servants thereby, Gabriel brought him the command of God. He came to me, said the apostle of God, while I was asleep with a coverlet of brocade whereupon was some writing, and said, read. I said, what shall I read? He pressed me with it so tightly that I thought it was death. Then he let me go and said, read. I said, what shall I read? He pressed me with it again so that I thought it was death. Then he let me go and said, read. I said, what shall I read? He pressed me with it the 3rd time so that I thought it was death and said, read. I said, what then shall I read? And this I said, only to deliver myself from him, lest he should do the same to me again. And then, of course, you got the first revelation of the Quran.
Oh, man. Brother Glenn, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we want our viewers to make sure they see the parallels here.
Okay.
So go right ahead from the place there. You've got it marked. Yes. Where you stopped. Okay.
Right. Had such an astonishing influence over me as to bind my tongue so that I could not speak. Thick darkness gathered around me, and it seemed to me for a time as if I were doomed to sudden destruction.
I'm sorry for laughing, Glenn. This is not a comedy show, by the way. I apologize. But this is really amazing. I've never heard this before. I've heard little elements, but as you read it, you could substitute the name Muhammad and just a few slight details, it'd be the same story. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay,
go ahead.
That's all right.
Glenn.
But exerting all my powers to call upon God, to deliver me out of the power of this enemy, which had seized upon me, at the very moment when I was ready to sink into despair and abandon myself to destruction, not to an imaginary ruin, but to the power of some actual being from the unseen world, who had such marvelous power as I had never before felt. Being just at this moment of great alarm, I saw a pillar of light exactly over my head, above the brightness of the sun, which descended gradually until it fell upon me. It had no sooner appeared than I found myself delivered from the enemy, which held me bound. When that light rested upon me, I saw 2 personages, whose brightness and glory defy all description, standing above me in the air. One of them spake unto me, calling me by name, and said, pointing to the other, this is my beloved Son, hear him. My object in going to inquire of the Lord was to know which of all these sects was right, that I might know which to join. No sooner therefore did I get possession of myself so as to be able to speak, than I asked the personages who stood above me in the light, which of all sects was right, for at this time it never entered into my heart that they were all wrong, and which I should join. I was answered, I must join none of them, for they were all wrong, and the personage who addressed me said that all their creeds were an abomination in his sight, that those professors were all corrupt, they draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They teach for doctrines the commandments of men, having a form of godliness, but deny the power. He forbade me to join with any of them, and many other things did he say unto me, which I cannot write at this time. So this here is where he kind of sets himself apart as being the deliverer of a new revelation, calling of God.
Okay, so we've got 4 minutes left before the break, before we take any callers. So what we see is not the end of the story is a bit different, but the first part of the story is almost identical to Muhammad's story. Now, tell me, Brother Glenn, what did tell us just a little bit, just briefly. We don't need any reference, just real briefly. How did Joseph Smith? Now he received another revelation in addition to the Bible, right?
Many.
So now, did he say that the Bible is from God? Essentially,
it has been corrupted over the ages by men, so therefore he needs to restore the church.
That sounds familiar, Brother David, that the Bible is truly from God, but it's been corrupted, and we need another book to correct it. And that's essentially what he said.
Yes.
And what was this other book? How did he get it?
Well, there were several, but the first one was the Book of Mormon, in which 3 days after this occurred, the angel Moroni appeared to him to tell him where to find the manuscripts that were written on golden plates located in Hill Cumorah in Palmyra, New York, from which he translated, which is, he claimed, he translated, which is now the Book of Mormon.
So then you're telling me that this new revelation, this Book of Mormon, of which there were other revelations, but basically the entire revelation was received and handled by this one man. I mean, there wasn't others that were saying, oh yeah, I heard the same thing and let me add to it. It was all through Joseph Smith.
Yes, others claim to have seen the golden plates, but he's the one who translated them, yes.
So in other words, just like Muhammad, he was the only voice which every word from the Quran came through his mouth. Of course, our Bible teaches us, out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. By that category, by that rule, we have to reject Muhammad. We would have to reject Joseph Smith as well, right?
Well, they claim that the Bible is one witness. The Book of Mormon is another witness.
I see.
So therefore, 2 or 3 witnesses.
Okay.
That proves their case.
All right, all right. Well, we got a couple more minutes. I want to ask you a couple more questions before the break, and then you might have some chance to teach some more on this. But what about miracles? Now, everyone expects a prophet to do miracles, and you realize that Muhammad had a problem there, and when people would ask him to do miracles, what would he say, David, essentially?
Sorry, people rejected miracles in the past, so God hasn't given me any miracles. I'm just a warner, and my only miracle is the Quran.
Very good. Now, what did Joseph Smith basically say or do?
Deliver the Book of Mormon, translated by the gift and power of God, and he gave later revelations which are now compiled in what's called the Doctrines and Covenants.
So according to Joseph Smith, his only miracle per se would be this miraculous book that he received.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I don't know if anyone's seeing some similarities to you-know-who, or if it's only me, but I'm seeing a lot. We got another minute and a half. There's more, isn't there? Isn't there more similarities? I mean, what about this fellow Joseph Smith? What did he say, for example, about polygamy? I mean, there are some similarities in teachings, isn't there?
Yeah, in the early stages of the Mormon Church, they practiced this. He had, in Doctrines and Covenants, section 132, he claims it's something necessary for people to gain the highest level of heaven.
Yeah.
So the current church does not practice it, but...
Yeah, how many wives did he have, about? Or
I'm not entirely sure, at least 30.
At least 30. Man, he beat Muhammad.
Yeah.
He beat Muhammad.
I don't know. See, I don't know, though, if you toss in the slave girls.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Muhammad had, he had a lot of black slave girls.
A lot of them were other men's wives, too.
Oh, yeah. So, but that's what you told me. Muhammad had sex, and he encouraged he told his Muslim followers it's okay to have sex with your captives, even if they're married to other men. And here's something you mentioned to me. What was Mormon Joseph Smith's view of women in general? Was it high and equal with men, or?
It's a long story. It takes some explanation, but in Mormon practice, the goal of every Mormon male is to become a god and rule over his own planet.
Now that's obviously different.
Yes, where the woman in this spiritual afterlife will help him produce spiritual children to help populate this planet, but she only can become co-ruler with him if he calls her out of the grave. So she is a secondary citizen because she needs him to save her, basically.
I see. So the man can become the god, but the woman would be sort of a lesser deity, I guess.
So, she has to die in his good graces, or she won't call him, or he won't call her.
Very quickly, let me just say before we go to the break, there's a